And I find it interesting that in a lot of their literature, they might show a guardsman petting a dog or helping someone with their groceries.
Or planting something.
Yeah, or planting something. So they were saying, these are our orders. We just want to be part of your community. We're just carrying out those orders, and we are here to help.
I'm wondering how big of a group they were in, right? We know that 2 of them were targeted, according to law enforcement, but there were other National Guard members nearby who were able to subdue the suspect. And so it makes me wonder also, it wasn't just the 2 of them.
Yeah, typically they're in groups. So there may be, what, 6 or 8 walking together.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I saw some National Guards members, National Guardsmen a couple days ago, and there were just 3 of them in the group, which is why I sort of wondered how many were actually part of the group and what they were doing. Again, part of the contours of things we're still trying to figure out to help you understand what happened today.
Yeah, we want to get to our Matthew Torres now, who's been covering this from the very beginning. So Matthew, we now know that those 2 guardsmen are in critical condition. The suspect is in the hospital. So what's happening at this location? We see that these streets are still closed off and there's still a police presence.
Yeah, no doubt. A huge police presence. We have more investigators making their way here to the scene. We're at 17th and K, but really just a block behind me, we have that large gathering of investigators and different law enforcement agencies, MPD, Secret Service, Park Police, Transit Police. They are all here as this investigation is ongoing. I want to step back into the camera because you guys mentioned as far as were there other National Guardsmen around, or were there 2 other people? When I first arrived here to the scene, I'm pulling up my phone here. This is a picture I took of that scene. You can see there were at least 3 other National Guardsmen there. This was 3, but when I first arrived, there were maybe about 5. So no doubt a group of National Guardsmen were around this area. Obviously, you heard from Kash Patel, the FBI director, saying they were here because of the high visibility presence that they were doing in this particular area. Those 2 guardsmen were shot just near the White House and just steps away from this Farragut West Metro stop. So, of course, there were people around. What witness describing seeing children running around as soon as that happened. I spoke to that witness. She heard the gunshots. In fact, we were the ones who broke the news to her that 2 National Guardsmen were the ones shot. Obviously, she was shocked by that, but this is what she had to say during our interaction. Can you explain what you saw earlier?
I was in the Uber lunch break heading to the dry cleaners. It was around 2:15 p.m. We were at 17th Street. I heard boom, boom 2 times. And then after I heard the boom, boom, the Uber driver says to me, "Why are these people running?" So then I look out the window and I see both sides of the street. A lot of little children running up the street and adults. So then I heard, "Help, help," 2 times. But I was so focused on the little children, they looked like they were 5 years old, that the little children were okay. I didn't look to see who yelled, "Help, help," 2 times.
Did you see the guardsmen?
I did, because we were on 17th Street when it happened. So the guardsmen then said we had to turn around. So then we turned around the Uber and went back. We had to, go back in the other direction. I'm just shocked because I never thought it was going to be anything of this magnitude.
Now that we know guardsmen have been shot, did you see them at all? Those
Guardsmen who
you didn't.
shot?
The guardsmen have been shot. Correct, 2.
What? No wonder it's such a magnitude of this. No, I didn't know that. Lord.
What is running through your mind?
It's just, I want to cry. That is so sad. Okay. And right before the holidays. And then I literally said, it's such a beautiful day. It's right before the holidays. Imagine, who would be that heartless with so many children in broad daylight right before Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving Eve.
That's really the big question here, is the motive. Why would someone want to shoot 2 National Guardsmen just outside of a metro stop near the White House? And so as we are learning more information, we are also hearing from other people who had to, for instance, hide in a bank as this was taking place. There was only a lone gunman, according to authorities. But again, this is the big question, why? And obviously the presence of the National Guard troops here in D.C. has really sparked a huge conversation, debate, and even even angst towards President Donald Trump during his federal crackdown. But, the question now as far as how this will affect, as far as public safety here in the city, has yet to be seen. But from federal authorities and what FBI Director Kash Patel has said, it really seems like a focus on crime and keeping D.C. safe is once again in the spotlight, guys.
Once again in the spotlight and now amplified, right? Because we're hearing the president is saying he wants another 500 National Guardsmen sent here to the city in the wake of this awful, awful incident here. Again, if you are just joining us, we've been talking about, boy, it's been quite a day here. This day that's supposed to be about family and gathering has been a really heartbreaking one for a couple families who are waiting to find out how their loved ones are doing. They know that they are National Guardsmen from West Virginia. Right. They know that they suffered injuries that left them in critical condition in a local hospital here. But of course, the thing they want to know most is that they will survive these injuries and be able to be welcomed back into their families again. Yeah,
and I think that the woman Matthew Torres spoke with there summed up how we're all feeling today.
She said she wanted to cry.
Yeah, and we stepped out today talking about this weather, this abnormally warm day in November, great day. Then you get this news here, and you're just thinking there's no way. Like, why? How?
Right.
And that's the question that we are still asking tonight, especially as we head into this holiday season. These two members of the Guard just on patrol in our city. Just making sure, keeping everyone else safe. And unfortunately, they were the target of violence today. We want to get to our Alexis Wainwright now.
Yeah, she is at GW Hospital, where a source has told us that the suspect is being treated for their injuries tonight. And Alexis, I don't know, are you getting any additional confirmation about that? What else do we know?
Well, Leslie, I can tell you that we've been checking in with a lot of our sources and people that we are familiar with. No other confirmation, but as you mentioned, we did have that one source initially tell WUSA 9 that the suspect is here at GW Hospital. Meanwhile, the two guardsmen are at MedStar. We do want to go back to around 3 o'clock this afternoon when we initially arrived to 17th and Constitution. When we first saw an ambulance, right? It was an unusual scene because we were on the National Mall seeing an ambulance parked on the grass there. We know that someone was airlifted from there, and then we saw the ambulance speed right away again. But right now, what we're seeing outside of GW Hospital is a police presence. We have seen DC police here behind me. We also can tell you that we see U.S. Secret Service a little over to the right side of me at the moment. They have been here for a couple of hours now. We initially saw a lot of other media crews out here, but some of them have since left. But we're still waiting for more information on this. But one thing I want to get back to that you guys were mentioning is that this is all happening the day before Thanksgiving. When we were initially along the mall, we were talking with a lot of people, a lot of families, people who were traveling into the Washington, D.C. region to be with family and friends. Initially, a lot of them were being pushed away from law enforcement because they had blocked off so many roads over there, especially along 17th Street. We can tell you many of them were saying that they were going to the White House to take pictures with their family members, to kind of gather with their friends, because this is the time of the year where they initially come out here and do all of that with their friends and family. But then we were able to break the news to them. A lot of them were similar to that woman that Matthew Torres talked to. They were in shock. A lot of them are still trying to wrap their minds around what exactly happened here. How could this happen? Why did it happen? Now, we know that crews are still investigating this and trying to figure out what exactly led up to those moments, but we heard during that press conference that it was initially somewhat of an ambush, this man coming up to them. But a lot of people are just really thrown off. They're saying, you know, they're trying to get into the spirit of Thanksgiving and being with their friends and family here in D.C., and now they hear of some tragic news like this. Now, a lot of them say that they will pray for those guardsmen. They're really thrown off by this news, but we can tell you that here at the hospital, it has been very quiet. A lot of people are still trying to process this information. We're still working some sources to get much more information. We do know that that suspect was injured at some point, and we've also seen some of the video where it appears where National Guard members were initially responding after that shooting happened. So a lot still going on here. People are calling these guardsmen heroes. A lot of people also talking with me on social media about this incident, saying that, you know, typically they see a lot of these National Guardsmen around the city, and they're often not doing much. They're just kind of standing there, not bothering anybody. So to think that someone would walk up to them and open fire the way that crews are describing this to us, it's just mind-blowing. So a lot of people still trying to process this information and kind of have conversations with us, but it's just so tragic to hear. Meanwhile, we'll stick here at the hospital and trying to figure out much more information. But again, we could tell you a lot of families coming in from Georgia and other places, just trying to have that spirit of Thanksgiving, and now they're kind of heartbroken and trying to pray and process this information as we try to learn more. So we'll send it back to you guys for now as we worked more of our sources for more information.
Right, we know all our reporters today, Alexis included. Thank you for doing the work today, which is so important, which is giving people accurate information about a real tragedy here in our city. I think we're going to go to Katie Lesso.
Yeah, let's go to Katie Lesso now.
Yeah, she's outside MedStar.
Yeah, that's right. And we believe that the 2 guardsmen, based on our sources, are there being treated. Again, they're in critical condition. We spoke to you a couple of minutes ago. Katie, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, well, when I last spoke to you, I mentioned that there was not a lot going on out here in the parking lot hospital. I want to take you back about literally 5 minutes. If we can roll some video of a large police presence pulling up here to MedStar Washington Hospital Center. Again, this is a level 1 trauma center. So one source telling us that both of the National Guards members were brought here to be treated. And this is a place where they are very obviously capable and trained to treat injuries of this magnitude, knowing that these 2 National Guards members were shot. So this is the place for them to be. They will get the best of the best when it comes to care here. But again, we saw several police cars pulling up, DC police, we saw federal law enforcement. We also saw at least 1 black SUV. Now, it was hard to make out the faces of who got out of that SUV, but obviously this is kind of confirming for us some of what we already believed to be true, that those National Guards members were taken here. We also saw several members of the National Guard arriving here with that group of police cars that arrived. If I take you right past us right now, you can see there's still a law enforcement presence out here. We're still waiting to get more information about how these 2 National Guards members are doing, but this obviously is kind of bringing it just to the magnitude of how serious their injuries are and how serious what unfolded here is. So again, we are at MedStar Washington Hospital Center, and we believe this is where those 2 National Guards members who were shot really not too far from here, about 4 miles from here, were brought to be treated for their injuries. That source telling us that the suspect in this was taken to GW Hospital. So we will continue to work our sources, try to get more information, and really try to find out who just went into the hospital, who was in those cars that pulled up, not only with local police, but federal police and the National Guard. Leslie and Lorenzo.
Well, they are, if they are there, they are in the very best place for this kind of care as we think about the kind of care they would need for trauma 1, where they would need potential emergency surgery, and certainly the best minds and the best hands and the best trained physicians to try to do the thing that we all hope they can do, which is to save their lives tonight. Katie, thank you.
And we got to highlight that they were in such a tough place.
Yeah.
We know that they received their orders to do the job here, and we heard our Alexis Wainwright mention as well that most people who live in DC or visit DC will say they see the Guard and they're just standing around and doing their job. But we know that they have been part of this whole political conversation and discussion and back and forth about their presence and using the National Guard in various cities throughout the U.S. So in this case, this is not what you want to see happen. We don't know why it happened as of yet, but you have to know and understand that when these members of the Guard went out in these streets every day, they knew that this was the risk.
It was the risk.
Yeah.
I do wonder, though, what they were thinking on this day,
Yeah.
right? The day before Thanksgiving. I'm going to go out. I'm going to be part of the community. I'm going to reassure people and let them know that we're okay, that they're okay, and then the unthinkable happens. The unthinkable happens. Rafael Sanchez Cruz is down not far from the area where this happened today. Rafa, you've been helping us to synergize what we've learned, talking to sources. What else are you able to share with us tonight?
Well, in the last 2 minutes, the mayor's office, I asked them, look, are we going to get another update? They're saying we really don't know at this point if we will have enough information to do another one of those briefings that we saw earlier. But, I did meet Lara here. She works in Logan Circle. She actually works just right where this happened. And she was came to the area to assess the scene. I mean, Lara, you were asking, first of all, just of the condition of those guardsmen who have been injured, and, share just how you're taking all of this in right now.
Well, first of all, it's a complete tragedy. I work at 17th in Pennsylvania, which is right here, and then I live in Logan, so I have a lot of exposure to the National Guard because I'm in the area that they've been working in, and I found them to actually be really, really helpful. They've really helped the neighborhood. They've been incredibly restrained. I've seen them help homeless people and get them to shelters. So I just want people to know that no matter how you feel about the deployment and the orders, that they are boots on the ground, and they've been extremely kind, and they're actually really providing a service here and doing good. And for it to happen so close to the White House, where the Secret Service is, and this is a really considered safe space generally, is actually quite concerning.
Yeah, and so you just described a little bit of what you've been seeing. Tell me more, because we have very limited information about what the actual Guardsmen were doing when this all happened. Kind of what have you seen? How they've been assisting? Have you seen them outside of the metro area?
I've seen them outside of the metro area quite a bit, talking to homeless people, and when a homeless person says, I don't want to go to a shelter, they leave and they send in what's called a crisis interventionist who talks to them. So there's some facilitation going on among the homeless people, which actually I like, and that makes me happy. But I've also seen just that crime is down in terms of just harassment. You can walk around and breathe again. And the streets are cleaner, and I want people to know that in the last year and a half, I would say crime has changed in DC down here. My friends in Kalorama and Chevy Chase, it's not like it used to be. They are more gang-oriented, for lack of a better term. They're teenagers. They're coming in SUVs. They're getting out of SUVs. They're running around. It's very unpredictable. It's completely unpredictable, and I would say all of that has stopped. It has completely stopped.
I will say that Lara initially, came to us and was chatting because she was concerned about whether the safety, because she works, down the street, was wondering kind of how this would all play out. We've said time and time again, this is a targeted incident, but to hear, Lara, this is targeted against this Guardsman. I mean, just kind of your thoughts with that.
Yeah. So that again, that is a tragedy. It is. I am glad that it's not just random shootings running around because that seems to have ceased. And obviously, I look forward to hearing more, and I hope that these men survive. And I'm saying a prayer.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank
you
you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah. So we're hearing from people directly impacted, just wanting to know more, like so many of us. And I will say I've been reaching out to different council members just to kind of get a gauge. Maybe perhaps they have a little bit more insight into what's going on. And I do want to say that Councilmember Brooke Pinto, who actually represents this area where the shooting took place, she's also the chair for the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. Her press team did send me a statement saying today's shooting near the White House is devastating and unacceptable. As the council member representing this area and the chair of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety, I am deeply disturbed and saddened that there was a shooting injuring 2 National Guard troops. There are public servants and they should not be harmed while doing their jobs. We must be more proactive as a country to get firearms off our streets. I'm actively working to get to the bottom of what happened. And I think that's really what we want to know, really how this all happened and how quickly we know that it was a targeted incident, as we heard from Lara here. And that's why I dragged her in, because she was just kind of concerned of, yes, we hear someone is in custody, but what does that mean just for the overall safety of members of the National Guard and for the overall DC community? Are we going to be able to, walk around in this area? And that's why I was kind of reassuring based on the information that we received from DC officials, that they're calling this a targeted attack. Again, no word yet from the mayor's office whether there will be another update, if they will have enough information to give us more details. And I think that brings a little bit more clarity, right? I think oftentimes people are wondering, well, what's going on? We've heard a lot of information and just kind of just pop up, and then all of a sudden we don't hear anything. Right now, they're really trying to determine, based on what they're telling me, what other relevant information they should let the public know about. And they're really trying to, again, piece together this incident, because as we We heard the details from witnesses about hearing screaming. Apparently does not reflect what officials told us when they were saying it was just an ambush attack, just a person turning a corner and shooting at these soldiers and what they're calling a targeted attack. So I think right now they're being very careful with what is going out, what information is going out. And unfortunately, the sad part is, again, as people are walking by, everyone is still under the impression that the members of the National Guard were, passed away based on that information that was given by the governor of West Virginia. But we are hearing from officials, DC officials, federal officials, that they are in critical condition. We want to emphasize that again because it's been, I think, the ongoing question that we've heard tonight here in downtown DC. I'll throw it back to you in the studio.
Yeah. All right, Rafa, thank you so much for that clarity. And Lara, they're making a good point. A lot of folks who live in the city now are just wondering, and they want to make sure they are going to be safe as well. But we got that reassurance a short time ago from city and federal leaders.
Right.
All right, we want to get to our Lionel Donovan now. He's been tracking more reaction coming in to this shooting this afternoon. He's live in the newsroom with some new information for us. Lionel.
Good evening, Lorenzo. Well, we've been monitoring reactions on social media, and one point that seems to keep coming up is, did these National Guard members need to be here? Keep in mind, last week, a judge ruled that the Trump administration should end the National Guard deployment in D.C. Now, the deployment, which has been going on since August, involved hundreds of National Guard members, and at last check, nearly 2,200 troops were here in the district from several states. And although the judge ordered the Trump administration to end the deployment, the administration was given 21 days to appeal the decision, and administration officials have publicly stated that they intended to appeal that ruling. Now, however, with this shooting, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says President Trump has directed him to send 500 additional National Guard troops to D.C. He went on to say that this shooting will only stiffen their resolve to keep D.C. safe. Now, Leslie and Lorenzo, we've been here in D.C. watching the National Guard as they perform their duties throughout the district. And we've seen, as we've kind of talked about earlier, we've seen them mostly pick up trash and patrol national parks and sporting events. And they didn't really do too much in regards to law enforcement. But with this shooting, that calculus may change. And some people are wondering if the National Guard's presence in D.C. will intensify after this shooting.
We heard a reporter asking the mayor that question shortly after that update earlier today, saying, is President Trump justified in deploying additional troops to the district because of this incident? The mayor didn't directly answer the question, simply saying that this was a targeted shooting.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so we will see. We have, again, another one of those things yet to learn additional details about, for sure. All right, thank you so much. Okay, so that was Lionel kind of keeping his finger on the pulse of what we're gathering.
What people are saying, and that has been the conversation essentially from a lot of folks just wondering, again, talking about the presence, if this could have been avoided somehow. And I know the family members are going to be asking that as well, again, as we let you know that those two National Guardsmen are in critical condition right now. Multiple sources telling us that they are at MedStar Washington Hospital receiving the best treatment. Absolutely, and we are pulling for them for the best possible outcome. Right now, we are joined by phone by Chris Purdy. He is a U.S. Army National Guard veteran. He is the CEO of the Chamberlain Network. That's a nonprofit that mobilizes veterans to defend democracy through civic engagement, through education. He also led veteran advocacy at Human Rights First and served in Iraq in 2011. Chris, we thank you for joining us. Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I guess, just you are an Army National Guard veteran, and this is the thing that nobody wants to happen, the worst possible thing that could happen. Can we just get your reaction to what we've learned about today?
Yeah, this is, you're quite right, the worst possible thing that could happen. I mean, these are folks, these service members who were in the West Virginia National Guard are just out doing their job, doing their duty. Many of them, don't want to be there. I was walking through U Street a couple weeks ago, and I ran into a staff sergeant, and I just said, hey, how are you finding D.C.? And the first thing he said to me was, well, I just got married. There is a real sense in many of these Guard units that they have better things to do with their lives. They don't want to be here. They want law enforcement and local agencies to run D.C. And to see them targeted by this horrible actor is really a travesty. And my thoughts and prayers are with both the service members and their families as we go into the holiday.
Yeah, and Chris, as you've been talking with some of the service members who have been deployed here to the district, what have they been telling you about sort of the climate? Did they feel like they were being targeted at all because of the political rhetoric and obviously the objection by some residents to them being here?
I think that what we've been communicating to residents and to members of the National Guard that we all know that this is not the best use of their time. That they should be back home in their states and in their communities doing the jobs that they signed up to do. And so when I talk to members of the Guard, especially in D.C., they're wondering, why am I not at home? Why am I not back in Ohio? Why am I not back in my home district trying to get ready for snowstorms and for hurricanes and for wildfires? I haven't gotten a sense that members of the Guards particularly felt like they were targeted. I think many members of the D.C. community has gone out of their way to try to, in some way welcome the members of the Guard, knowing that they don't want to be here, that their mission really isn't to do this type of, law enforcement work. I am very concerned about what this will do to that relationship between members of the community and the National Guard. So definitely keeping an eye on that, and working with the folks that I've been talking to over the past number of months to try to make sure that relationship is still strong.
Chris, that's such an important point you bring up, and it also sort of underscores this broader concern about the risks faced by Guardsmen who are on duty in public-facing law enforcement roles, and really adding some urgency to the debate around whether we need to have Guardsmen going into American cities patrolling American citizens.
Yeah, I mean the motives of this shooter are still unknown, but what we do know is that these shootings would not have happened had these troops not been brought into D.C., had local law enforcement or federal law enforcement been empowered and equipped to do whatever it is that they think the National Guard should do. There are over 1 million there's nearly 1 million peace officers in this country, and there's over 100,000 federal law enforcement officers. There's no reason why we needed to bring in National Guard units to escalate the situation in D.C.
Yeah, Chris, I'm thinking of members of the Guard who sign up to do this sort of life-saving work, or this life-saving work, I should say. And give us some perspective here. How often are they deployed? And generally when they are, how long are they out for that deployment? Because I'm thinking of these Guardsmen here, hundreds of them who have been stationed in D.C. since August now. Is this typical in terms of the length of a deployment?
Yeah, so I joined the Army National Guard in 2004 after 9/11, and many of the folks who I served with, I was in the New York Army National Guard and then transferred to the Virginia National Guard. We're on federal missions supporting work after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Those were long-term missions. You might remember seeing them, around town, and certainly in New York City. Many of them are still actually there. But the average tour for a domestic mission is quite limited. You think of snowstorms, you're out for a couple of weeks, or a hurricane, a couple of weeks like that. The fact that this has gone on since August and is likely to continue through February was the latest that I heard, and will probably continue on further after that. This is abnormal, and it's especially unprecedented given the fact that many of these troops are not from the district. And these folks who were targeted were from West Virginia, but there are troops from Ohio. That is something that has never happened in I think in living memory, where you have out of state, out of district troops being brought in to an unfamiliar territory. And frankly, this is something that we have been warning about, is that when you have members of the military, members of the National Guard who come into a new environment, they're unfamiliar with the situation, there are lots of risks that are posed here, and which is why we say if you have a policing mission that you need to carry out in the district, it needs to be done by law enforcement. We cannot bring people from outside of D.C. to do that work here.
And yet we hear that the president wants to deploy another 500 National Guard members from other parts of the country to the city because of what happened here. Does that give you pause?
Yeah, unfortunately, the president's only response to these issues is to escalate. We saw that in L.A. We've seen that across the country when he perceives a law and order. He wants to escalate, and he wants to use the military as a show of force. The reality is if you really want to solve crime, if you really want to bring justice to these service members who were attacked, and you think that law enforcement is the way to do that, then you need to bring in the people who are trained to do law enforcement, and that's the only way to do it. Bringing an extra 500 troops from other states is going to it's not going to de-escalate the situation at all.
Yeah, so Chris, when we think of the Guard as well, they're not controversial, not political. They respond to these snowstorms, other disasters,
Right.
and usually people are happy to see them.
They
They're
wanna see
welcome.
them,
Exactly.
yeah.
So are you worried about recruitment efforts at all when you talk about getting more of these folks who are willing to go out and pause their own lives to serve other communities and other families?
Recruitment and retention. The Guard this year did meet their recruiting standards, but the last numbers that I had seen from over the summer showed a really worrying sign in retention rates. So I think in June, the Guard Bureau put out that about 63% of troops who were up for retention, meaning they would reenlist, had signed up. Now that's usually in the 80s.
Wow.
So we're very concerned, and we're going to keep an eye on the folks that the numbers that come out to see who's reenlisting. But the people who sign up for the National Guard, they don't want to be engaged in political stunts, right? They want to serve their communities. They do it out of a sense of mission and duty to their neighbors. And if they wanted to do federal law enforcement work, they would have done that. The job applications are there. Many of these people are qualified to do that, but they did. They are our neighbors. They go to our churches. Their kids are at our soccer games. And we should be giving them every support that they need to do the work at home.
Hey, Chris, we had a rather unusual situation unfold where we were told by the governor of West Virginia that these two National Guardsmen had tragically lost their lives. And then 22 minutes later, we found out that was not the case. There were questions about their conditions, and we know now that they are in critical condition. That was a jolt, certainly, to us, for those of us who traffic in facts and want to make sure that we give out correct information. But there were also questions about notifications. Is there a chance that family members might have been told that their loved ones had perished, only to then have to be told that actually that wasn't correct in that time frame?
I don't want to speculate on the notification process that had gone on. It seemed to me that this was rather quick. Obviously, National Guard units are pretty tight-knit. Many members of the National Guard came from the same towns, the same neighborhoods. They go to the same schools, so these people know each other quite well. So it would not be surprising to me that their units are doing everything that they can to ensure that families are getting the most accurate information as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and Chris, before we let you go, just another question here. I wanted to find out, in terms of seeing their relatives, their family members, I believe it was you who mentioned that a Guardsman mentioned getting married not too long ago. So how often are they cycled out? Do they get to go back home to see their relatives, or would these Guardsmen have been stationed here since August without a chance to see their loved ones?
My understanding is the vast majority of these troops have been here since August.
Okay.
I have not seen any real rotation schedule that would indicate otherwise.
Well, Chris Purdy, we sure thank you for your time. We thank you for your service to our country that makes it possible for us to even have these kinds of conversations. And we are sure thinking of your National Guard brothers or sisters. Tonight, we don't actually know.
Right.
We are thinking of these National Guardsmen and their family and your extended families, because we know this touches all of you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Chris,
All right,
thank you.
And at 6:01, for those of you just joining us, we should update you on what we've been following. It has been a really heartbreaking, devastating day here in the district. We're learning that 2 members of the National Guard were shot. They were ambushed, according to police, shortly after 2 o'clock today near Farragut Square in Northwest D.C. We know the suspect, who is also injured, has been captured.
We know that there is a really tough assignment for the physicians who have to work so hard tonight to be hopefully able to give their families the notification that they are hoping for, the best outcome possible, that they are in critical condition, but they will survive and they will make it. But that is not clear yet. There is a really a valiant effort underway right now to try to save their lives. We've been told by multiple sources that the National Guardsmen have been taken to MedStar for that treatment. We were also told by sources that the suspect was taken to George Washington University. And we should mention, as we come out of that detail that you're sharing, police and law enforcement said this suspect ambushed those National Guardsmen, held a gun in the air, pointed at them, shot at them. Thankfully, there were National Guardsmen nearby that were able to subdue this suspect, and then law enforcement came and did the rest. It's not clear, though, who shot this suspect, whether those gunshots came from National Guardsmen or from law enforcement that responded.
Yeah, and again, the question is still why. The suspect injured, presumably being questioned at this hour. We don't know the extent of their injuries or that suspect's injuries at this moment. But we do know, again, that the Guardsmen, they are in critical condition. Our Katie Lusso is at MedStar Washington Hospital in the district where sources are telling us those Guardsmen were taken and are being treated. Katie, give us an update. What more are you hearing?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of activity out here as we speak. More SUVs, black SUVs are pulling up here. We saw a helicopter landing and then taking off, and a lot of police out here in the parking lot. Let's give you a look right now. These two black SUVs, we saw someone get out and rush inside. We've also seen National Guard members here, as well as federal law enforcement, local law enforcement. So a lot is going on. You can see there's actually some hospital staff out here as well, waiting for whoever apparently is arriving here to the hospital. So obviously a source telling us that both of the National Guard members who were shot were taken here to MedStar Washington Hospital Center, which, as we've talked about at length, really makes sense. This is a level 1 trauma center. They are capable of dealing with the type of injuries these two National Guard members are dealing with, gunshot wounds. Obviously, this is a trauma center that has helped patients who've been victims in 9/11 and other major medical crises. So they have the capability to treat these two National Guard members for the injuries, the extent of the injuries we believe they have based on what we are being told by law enforcement officials. So it is not clear exactly who has arrived here to the hospital, but just a ton of activity. You can see two hospital employees coming over to these SUVs. Not clear who is inside. We did see several other SUVs pulling up not too long ago. And shortly before that, we saw a slew of people arriving here to the hospital with law enforcement. You can see right now, actually, a member of the National Guard walking past us as we speak. So it is not clear exactly who has arrived here to the hospital, but we have just seen a ton of activity really start to unfold here in the last few minutes or so. So we're going to continue to keep an eye on what is going on out here. But obviously a very large police presence, lots of security. If you take a look right here directly in front of us, you can see a Secret Service officer is directing traffic through this parking lot. So they're trying to keep this area secure for whatever is going on inside right now and for whoever is arriving here to the hospital, where sources tell us that the two National Guard members were taken. We're going to keep trying to get more information for you and keeping an eye on who arrives here, and we will bring you updates as we get them. Leslie and Lorenzo.
All right, thank you for those updates. You know, we know that the president is not here in Washington. He was in Florida. He ordered 500 troops to come here, and you just have to wonder if the president will actually come back to the city, given the extent of what's happened here today.
We heard FBI Director Kash Patel saying they're going to treat this as two federal law enforcement officers were injured in this case. Again, they're in critical condition there. We are still waiting to find out. The big question a lot of folks have tonight is the why. Why this happened. We know what happened now based on the press conference a little earlier this evening, but a lot of people are still trying to wrap their minds around, one, why this would happen, and also you look at the timing of this as well.
Yeah, Matt Gregory has been sort of getting the pulse, taking the pulse of people who have been talking about this all day. He was there from nearly the very beginning, talking to people who had heard something, saw something, and were beginning to process what had happened in front of them. Matt, what are you hearing now as we approach, 3-4 hours into this situation?
It looks like, for the most part, Leslie, the folks who were witnesses, the folks who may have been here have left the area. And I mean, and two sort of like reasons for that. Number one is that obviously we're getting later in the day, it's becoming more dark out, but you're also seeing an increased police presence as more officers and investigators start to come in. And this is very clearly, there's not much activity here other than that really important detective work. In fact, while we were standing here right before you came to me, a few MPD detectives walked right by. They had just, it looks like they were talking to some folks at the Subway across the street and other restaurants, M&T Bank. There's all sorts of different portions of this investigation that, like, you really have to go over with a fine-tooth comb. And one of the things we've seen over the last, I would say, 30 minutes or so, is you can see off here at the corner of Farragut Square. This is right across from the metro stop here. There's now lights, floodlights that have been brought in. They're starting to bring in more floodlights. We're seeing increased lab work being done by some of our forensics teams over here, and we're seeing more federal and local interfacing going on together. But to reiterate, if you're just checking in and you have just kind of are just now beginning to hear the news, 2 National Guardsmen ambushed not far from Farragut West, shot by a suspect who was then subdued by other National Guardsmen and law enforcement and shot himself, and then taken to a nearby hospital. Sources are telling me that suspect is at George Washington Hospital, but the 2 National Guardsmen who are in critical condition, we're told from our sources, and you just heard Katie Lusso saying that based on the presence she's seeing at MedStar Washington Hospital Center, that is likely where the 2 National Guardsmen are right now. But one of the things I want to point out, I'm off camera because it's helpful for you to be able to see the scene of all the different apparatuses that have been brought in, the mobile crime labs, as well as the different units. So what you're seeing right now is MPD is the lead, but they're working in tandem with a variety of federal agencies and other local agencies. Metro Transit Police, because this happens so close to a metro stop, is here. We're seeing Homeland Security, we're seeing ATF, FBI, Park Police, DEA. Everyone has sort of been brought to bear to find a way to at least move this investigation with some impetus pretty quickly through. And that's where, earlier tonight when there was a press conference that was all those agencies, you heard from FBI Director Kash Patel talking about the importance of bringing all those resources to bear. And then you heard the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, kind of reiterating and sort of echoing a similar point. Here's what they had to say about the work that needs to be done and about this tragedy tonight.
Since this is an assault on a federal law enforcement officer, this will be treated at the federal level as an assault on a federal law enforcement officer. The FBI will lead out on that mission with our interagency partners, to include the Department of Homeland Security, Secret Service, ATF, DEA, and we're thankful for the mayor's assistance in this matter, the Metropolitan Police Department and their skills in investigating homicides and gun shootings in this city is exceptional. We will work together collaboratively because this is a matter of national security, because this is a matter of pride. President Trump has been informed. We've been in contact with the White House. We will shortchange the American public with no resources to make sure we find and safeguard our nation's capital right here in Washington, D.C., and bring anyone responsible for this heinous act of violence.
And we join with the FBI director in ensuring that MPD investigates, the U.S. Attorney prosecutes this case to the fullest extent of the law. I've had the opportunity to brief U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was speaking to the president when I called, as well as the United States Attorney Pirro, who assured me that this case will have her office's complete attention.
Yes, and when you hear them talking about that, this is what makes D.C., among many things, quite unique when it comes to any sort of law enforcement investigation, is that there are so many jurisdictions that converge on any street corner. So in this case, because this is a crime in D.C., not particularly on federal land, but close enough, MPD has taken the lead here. At least they are also the ones who have the most extensive work doing shootings. That's one of the things that, we've covered for years now, has been, just the work that MPD does in terms of homicides and shootings. But as you can see, this is what makes DC unique, but can also be difficult. It requires all those agencies and local partners to work together well, not step on each other's toes, and find a cohesive way to bring this investigation into a courtroom for the U.S. Attorney to take over. So that's what they're doing now, if you're wondering. You're seeing forensics teams go over evidence. You're seeing ballistics crews look over the shooting scene and what happened there. And you're also seeing that big floodlights are being brought in because this has become more difficult as the sun has gone down to kind of put the scene back together and, try to build back and figure out what happened, right? To recreate the scene, as it were. So What we know right now, just to kind of get the point across, is that we know 2 guardsmen, National Guardsmen, both from West Virginia, shot in critical condition. We're hearing from sources they've been taken to MedStar Washington Hospital. We also are hearing at the same time that the suspect was also injured. He was shot as well as a result of the National Guardsmen and law enforcement subduing him, and he was taken, according to our sources, to George Washington Hospital. And if you're wondering, what was happening, we've been told this was a high visibility patrol, meaning that at the time the National Guardsmen were walking around with the idea of being seen so as to deter crime, not at all suspecting that this would actually incur an ambush, which is what police have described to us today, that they were ambushed. And that was when the suspect shot them. We're working to get more information. As you can see, it's going to become a night investigation as the lights are coming in and more, not less, police are coming in to overview the scene, to kind of get an idea of all the witnesses that might be available, all the close camera, all the cameras that might be available, as well as what we can tell from that like old-fashioned police work, the forensics, the bullet casings, the fingerprints, all of these things, because that is what will be used to build the case against the suspect. Outside of Farragut Square, I'm Matt Gregory. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Matt, thank you. Out on the scene from the daylight to the nightlight, giving us an indication of work still to come.
Like Matt mentioned there, we heard they had to have a suspect, but as he punctuated, they have to make sure this case is buttoned up and they have everything to make their case and say this is the person who fired at these 2 National Guard members of the National Guard. We do know that the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Janine Pirro, tweeted just shortly after 4 o'clock saying she is in town and she's on her way to the scene to try and wrap her mind or get her hands on this as well.
Yeah, we haven't seen her out there yet, but certainly there is a lot of work to do as they have to pull a lot of pieces together to move forward on this case. First things first, of course, making sure these National Guardsmen get the best care possible and have the best outcome possible. We're going to transition now over to Alexis Wainwright. She is outside of GW Hospital, where we believe, a source has told us, the suspect is being treated. And that's about all we've heard at this point. Alexis, is there more to share about the story at this point here?
Well, Leslie, I can tell you we've been mentioning for a couple of hours now those little indicators as if the suspect is here at GW. No sources have confirmed other than that one initial source to us, but I can tell you we've been seeing a lot of activity with Secret Service here behind me. They've been going in and out of this emergency entrance that is right here on the side of GW's hospital. Now, one thing, just moments ago, we saw 2 more Secret Service members who came out, put something here in the vehicle, and then went right back inside. But about 15 to 20 minutes ago, I can tell you we saw about 6 different Secret Service members walk in together. They had on all of their gear initially, walking in to go inside that hospital. Meanwhile, while that was happening right here down the block, we also saw a couple of National Guard members. They were kind of standing in front of a van that was unmarked. So just, again, little indicators as if the suspect might be here at the hospital, but no other sources confirming it just yet. But if you take a look here outside, again, you can see a lot of activity. We are now seeing 3 more Secret Service members who have just parked their car right here in front of the emergency entrance. They're getting out, gathering some of their stuff, and now walking inside the hospital. So this is also a part of the process where we continue to see a lot of movement. We're waiting for officials to do more in this investigation because we're waiting for the identification of that suspect, right? This is the part of the process where they kind of gather together and get more information together before they release that information to us. But we can tell you that is what we have been seeing for the past 20 minutes or so. A lot of activity with Secret Service, and I'm going to take another look behind me now, and we can see some of them standing across the street. Now, we are still reaching out to a lot of more sources to find out much more information, but we can tell you that we have been kind of waiting here to get more information. Meanwhile, talking with a lot of people who are passing by, some still learning the information, some of us breaking the news to them like, hey, this is what happened. 2 National Guard members were shot earlier this evening, and we believe someone might be here in this hospital. So that's what we've been seeing for the past couple of minutes or so. I can tell you now we're seeing more law enforcement walking into the hospital here. And we can tell you we've been also seeing that door locked. We noticed that they have to go up to that door and identify who they are before that door opens and they're allowed to go into the hospital. So a lot more security out here. We saw DC police here an hour ago, and now we have 4 different U.S. Secret Service vehicles outside here of the hospital at GW Hospital. So a lot going on. We're still going to stick here and try to find out more information, but we can tell you we're seeing a lot more movement within the last 30 minutes or so.
All right, Alexis, thank you. And obviously we have a source who said the suspect is there, but hospitals like GW, we know, have a history of accommodating secure transport and monitoring of people who are suspects in crimes, and law enforcement, they can even assign officers or units to actually maintain the custody while that suspect is receiving care. And police have a mandate to ensure that a suspect gets immediate care in a case like this, because they have to preserve the clothing, the bullets, all these things that can help them in the course of an investigation like this, where there is so much on the line.
And they also want to protect the suspect as well in a situation like this, because we know oftentimes in situations like this, when you hear about law enforcement being targeted, in this case members of the National Guard, there may be some folks who want to retaliate. So they also want to make sure that this hospital is secure and the suspect is protected.
And they need information from this suspect. They don't want this suspect's condition to change, which makes it harder for them to be able to answer the why behind the alleged attack.
And I thought it was interesting earlier, Les, at the press conference, someone was asking about the suspect's condition. Are they in good enough condition to answer some of these questions?
We didn't get an answer
yet. So hopefully we can get some answers soon. Again, a lot of the folks, a lot of you at home, also us, trying to figure out why this person just walked up near 17th and I today and just fired at 2 members of the National Guard.
Yeah, no one understands the why, and we may never understand.
It will never make
the
sense.
Why.
Yeah,
we may never understand the why. Let's get over to our Matthew Torres, I believe, who has been on this story since the very beginning, talking to some of the very first people who heard the gunshots, who saw what happened. Matthew, a lot has changed since 2 o'clock.
Certainly, and when I first got here to the scene, walking up to the scene as close as we can get, I really can't help but recall a security guard on the phone talking to someone, yelling, saying, why does this have to happen before Thanksgiving? I think the holiday week and surrounding all of what happened just really magnifies the gravity of what happened here at Farragut Square, knowing that tomorrow is Thanksgiving. And you can't help but notice when you're walking around this scene, there are people visiting here for the holidays. In fact, I was just on the other side. I wanted to speak to as many witnesses as possible. Clearly, a lot of them have either left the scene or at least gone home. But what I ended up speaking to were people who either just got here via their flight or were dropped off, trying to check into their hotels. And police officers are really blocking them from going unless they can just walk there. You clearly cannot park anywhere near here. You have people worried trying to get to their cars. I spoke to a couple. They were trying to get to a parking garage, trying to get to their dog at home, and the wife is clearly pregnant. And so there's all these compounding just effects because of this shooting. And the biggest thing is obviously understanding why. Let me step aside here to show you what we are seeing. Since we went live to you in the last hour, there's been more people that came up here, clearly more equipment. It seems like there's a large tow truck there. There's been a large gathering of investigators. We have a couple of Secret Service members here blocking this road right now. If we go 2 blocks down, keep in mind for anyone who may be driving around here that those roads are also still blocked off. So no doubt a very large crime scene here, as we have at least one somewhat clear vantage point, because down that block where you see all of those people, that is where that shooting took place. That is where those 2 National Guardsmen were shot. We are just a couple blocks away from the White House. We were just outside of the Farragut West Metro. So I bring all of this up because kids were around, people working were around, probably getting ready for the holidays. They were around. And so one of the questions I tried to ask after the press conference was anybody hurt? Because according to at least a couple witnesses who were around at the time, they remember seeing at least potentially a 3rd person being taken away from the ambulance. So, of course, we are hoping to get more information. Unclear if there will be another press conference, but the presence of the National Guard troops, as you guys have been talking about, is what will happen in the future. We already heard from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, bring up that President Donald Trump is now wanting to add even more National Guard troops here in the district.
Cowardly, dastardly act
targeting the best of America, heroes willing to serve in Washington, D.C., serve for people they don't know and they've never met because they love their country and their capital and their community. They were willing to do dangerous things others were not because they love their fellow Americans. Someone decided to turn that into targeting National Guardsmen. That will only stiffen our resolve. We will never back down. We will secure our capital. We will secure our cities. In fact, this happened just steps away from the White House. It will not stand. And that's why President Trump has asked me, and I will ask the Secretary of the Army to the National Guard, to add 500 additional troops, National Guardsmen, to Washington, D.C. This will only stiffen our resolve to ensure that we make Washington, D.C. safe and beautiful. The drop in crime has been historic. The increase in safety and security has been historic. But if criminals want to conduct things like this, violence against America's best, we will never back down.
All right, we are moving our cameras here because we have police officers trying to get out of the way, trying to leave this scene. You can see just the amount of cameras from local and national media that have congregated here. So we don't know how long this scene will be blocked off, but clearly it's far from over as we have police officers leaving the scene, entering the scene. This investigation is ongoing after those 2 National Guardsmen were shot near the White House. Guys.
You mentioned, Matthew, yeah, this is far from over in terms of the investigation. A lot of folks are concerned about the 2 guardsmen who were shot as well. And also what happens after today, as you mentioned there with the Secretary of War, Defense Secretary Hegseth, talking about the president's request to send hundreds more National Guardsmen to the district to patrol the city.
So it's a long night, but it could be some very long weeks and months to come as a result of what happened today. So we have been really kind of trying to give everybody a little bit of context for all the parts of this story, right? Happening the day before Thanksgiving, right? Targeting National Guards members who, by all accounts, didn't even have a chance to defend themselves because, as law enforcement told us, the suspect appeared to target, and they could see he was the only person there. He held the gun up. He shot directly at these guardsmen, and this pierced the skies and the sound and really the heart of the city today on a day where we were all focused on family and gratitude and being together. And so now we're all thinking of 2 other families who aren't sure whether that will be the case.
Yeah, and we know that these 2 guardsmen at the time, right there at 17th and I Streets in Northwest near Farragut Square Park, typically on a day like this, you would think that downtown DC is deserted. A lot of folks are off from work perhaps, and tourists just aren't in the city, they're elsewhere. But on this particular day, a nice day in the district, we know that a lot of people were in that area at the time, and that's probably why the National Guardsmen were patrolling that area, because there were going to be a lot of people there at the time. They were simply following their orders, patrolling the streets at the time, when yes, the suspect just walked up and fired 2 shots at these guardsmen.
Rare day in Washington in November, late November, where we're temperatures in the 70s, right? In some places, which would be a natural sort of gravitational pull for people to just be outside. And so it's amazing that there weren't more people hurt as a result of this, given all of the things that we've just talked about. The most important thing to know is that there are 2 National Guardsmen from West Virginia who are in a fight to survive tonight with critical injuries as a result of being targeted by what has been described as a lone gunman who took a gun, aimed their way, and hit them.
Yeah, just ambushed those 2 guardsmen. We want to get to our Rafael Sanchez Cruz now. He has been out there not too far away from where this all took place today, talking with some of our neighbors who are rightfully concerned about their safety and also what happens next, and these 2 guardsmen as well. Rafa, what are you hearing from folks out there?
Yeah, Lorenzo, slowly we've been seeing people who were in the blocked off area slowly coming out. Some saying they were staying in hotels, some saying they were at work, and now they're being allowed to kind of come out. We've been chatting with some people. I spoke to 2 foreign students who say they stay at a hotel that's not far from where the shooting took place. And I was kind of just walking them through that scenario, and they were kind of just stunned to hear what had happened. And everyone's first question is, how are these 2 members members of the National Guard doing? And of course, that's a question that we all have tonight. But people are just kind of sharing their sentiment. But we were talking. Yes, it is a holiday. It seems that usually a lot of people aren't in DC, but we actually have a lot of people staying in the nearby hotels for the holiday. So they're kind of, some are not being allowed to enter, but they are being allowed to exit slowly. And those who do work in this area were telling me, as we heard from Lara earlier, who was saying, look, they were outside the metro stops. It made me feel a little bit more comfortable. Just having those extra eyes and that visibility gave people some peace. So hearing the news of what happened of this shooting, obviously hitting hard for a lot of people. And I guess a lot of the people just also still grappling with the details of 500 additional National Guard troops and wondering how they will be deployed into the city and how they will be strategically used. Common question that we're getting: were the two guardsmen who were shot today, were they carrying guns? As according to what officials told us, they were armed. And other people are just wondering, well, how will this change the landscape of the downtown area? Will they concentrate the additional troops in this area? We still don't know. I've been reaching out to city officials and sources there. They're telling me that right now it doesn't seem like there will be any press update. I will say U.S. Attorney Janine Pirro is supposed to be on scene. I saw her staff members arrive early into the scene and kind of trying to assess the situation. It's possible that we will hear from her. We know that she does provide continuous updates and availability for the news to kind of keep us up to date, more than just knowing that they will go to the furthest extent of the law on this case. But I'm wondering if right now we'll get any indication whether we have any sound, because, as the conversation here in DC has been continuing regarding the presence of the National Guard, there's been the conversation of, will they be participating in police enforcement? What is their role? Are they trained? We heard Kash Patel today saying that, that due to the training that these troops have received is why this situation did not turn into an incident where other people were injured. I know it's still unconfirmed, other injuries involved in the situation, and it seems like the limited information that we had, it was resolved pretty quickly. But that's been an ongoing conversation among DC residents, and knowing that confirmation that these soldiers really stepped in, were able to detain the suspect as law enforcement arrived on scene is kind of the how this is all supposed to play out. But now it's not going just based on what DC officials are telling us. Now we're seeing the incident of how it actually is played out in the worst case of scenarios. So we heard FBI Director Kash Patel really double down on that messaging, saying, look, they should be here. They are trained. They are doing the best. And the reason that we're seeing a safe DC is because of that. I know if we ask DC officials, they're also willing to tout the efforts that happened before the federal surge, right? All the additional enforcement that they've been doing, the extra hours that police have been putting in, and the actual community work. Also, our community organizers who have been putting in the work to kind of drive down that historic crime that we saw in 2023 that was so often used to justify the increase of the federal surge. So I've been mentioning that sound from FBI Director Kash Patel. Let's listen to his exact words.
And I would just like to add, the reason that this suspect is in custody is because of the bravery of the men and women of the National Guard who responded due to their extensive training to secure American lives today. There was not any further injury and any further shootings. We should highlight the fact that the men and women of law enforcement, the interagency, the Department of War, and the National Guard executed their training with great precision today and prevented an even greater tragedy from befalling us.
Look, after weeks of hearing from DC residents who shared their concerns, I think it would be good to hear kind kind of how all this played out to put people at ease, because as we've been talking about this, there's a lot of mixed emotions regarding this incident, especially when you talk to DC residents who have just seeing this all play out in DC with the federal surge, post-federal surge. So I think it'd be interesting to kind of hear how this incident all played out and seeing how the National Guard and the local police and the federal police all kind of played in a role in this. We're expected to potentially get more of those details, and I'm sure colleagues will be following up on to kind of map out how this all happened. But again, just DC residents that have been walking by just sharing their concerns of, well, how will the additional resources be used? And I'm sure it's a question that we all have right now. I'll toss it back to you.
Okay, Rafa, thank you for that update.
All right, we want to bring back in Chris Purdy, who we talked with earlier in the hour. He is an Army National Guard veteran. He is the CEO of the Chamberlain Network, and he served in Iraq back in 2011. We thank you, as always, for your service, Chris, both to our nation and to us, helping us to understand a bit more about the contours of this. We heard Rafa mention Kash Patel, the FBI director, talking about training and experience. And so can you talk about how well these National Guard troops are prepared for some kind of ambush situation like what happened today?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. So the National Guard is a professional force. I understand that a lot of people think that it's 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. But the reality is that over the last 25 years, the National Guard has been really transformed into a very professional force that is now deploying at rates that are as high as it was in 2008 and 2009 during the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan. So these are people who understand what combat is, understand what training is. But the reality is they are not in combat. They have been called into DC to do a mission that many of them don't agree with, and so you see a lot of these folks. They're walking around. They look bored. They're doing kind of menial tasks, and this would come as a surprise to many members of the National Guard. I certainly wouldn't have expected it if I was on a mission like this. And so while the Guard is professional, it's horrifying that this attack happened. And I'm grateful for members of law enforcement and the National Guard members who subdued the suspect. But I just want to reiterate that had this deployment not happened, the shooting wouldn't have happened. So those two things they can't be the same.
Yeah, and Chris, you mentioned this is a different type of mission. So take us to the moments before 2:15, before this ambush today. What would the day have been like for these National Guardsmen from the beginning up until this moment?
Sure. So these are folks that have set areas of patrol. They're walking around in small teams, and they get their orders from their commanding officer, and usually, while I'm not entirely privy to the West Virginia National Guard's operating standards, but there usually is some sort of threat brief if something is coming up. So these are people who take their environment seriously. But the past 6 months have shown that there have really been no need for them here. So it is not surprising to me that many of these troops would have been caught off guard by what appears to be a lone wolf targeting these troops for whatever reason.
How would this kind of targeted attack impact the morale? I mean, you talked about a group of people who already don't necessarily want to be here, and they may not agree with their mission, but they do what they are told to do. How does something like this impact what happens with them tomorrow?
So there are going to be a lot of conversations in barracks and in bays and group chats and family chats. People are going to be very concerned. They're going to be on guard. They're going to be watchful. And I would just encourage citizens and civilians in the DC area to reach out to members of these National Guard and just show them how much you support them. Because what we don't want to see is members of the National Guard feel like the citizens of the District of Columbia or Americans in general are treating them as the enemy, because that's not the case. The members of the National Guard are not the enemy. They are doing a job that they have been assigned to do, and they're going to execute it to the best of their abilities. And morale is something that we should all take very seriously. But it's something that our fellow citizens have an impact over, and how we treat our service members who are in the streets at this moment.